Have you ever wondered why sometimes you learn something very fast, but it may take you longer to learn something else? If you're interested, keep on watching this webinar. My name is Castillo, and I am the manager of the Learning in Context program at Inspire. Today, I would like to speak to you about the general principles of learning. I feel these are very important because they apply to anyone who has the intention of teaching something to somebody else. It could be a teacher teaching their student. It could be a parent teaching their child. Um, Currently, we are in a situation where a number of parents had to fill the shoes of their teachers, their children's teachers. And I believe that if we keep these principles in mind, we could be a bit more successful with whatever we want to teach. So basically, the first part of this webinar, I will be going into a number of principles, 8 principles, in fact, to be exact. And in the second part of this webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. However, I encourage you to start asking questions by typing your question, even from the start of this webinar, so that then, towards the end, I will be able to choose some of your questions and answer them. I would like to show you a short presentation which will assist me in explaining each of these principles. So, the 8 principles which I will be going into are the principles of effect, primacy, recency, exercise, intensity, readiness, requirement, and freedom. We will be going into them individually. And then, as I said, if you have any questions, we can answer them in the second part of this webinar. So, the very first principle, the principle of effect. So this is based on the emotional reaction of the learner. We know that if we try to make our learning experiences as positive as possible, then the learning is going to be strengthened. On the contrary, if learning is associated with unpleasant feelings, the likelihood is that learning is going to be weakened. And this is why it is very important for educators, for parents, for anyone who is, as I said before, trying to teach something to somebody. Why this is very important to create a positive atmosphere which actually encourages learning. The more positive the environment is, the more motivated the person will be. The second principle is the principle of primacy. This is related to the concept of time, where basically things which are learned first tend to leave a strong impression in our brain. Okay, I'm sure this is something that a lot of teachers frequently think about. If you want to teach something, make sure you teach it right the first time. And this is why it is super important to be prepared, of course. Another principle related to the concept of time is recency. Okay, we know that the things that are most recently learned are best remembered. I'm sure we've all been in the situation where a couple of hours before an exam, we're trying to cram in as many things as possible in our heads. This works sometimes. However, more often than not, if we had to check if we still remember these things a month later, we realize that we would have forgotten them. The reason is that this is one of the principles which encourages learning, but it doesn't encourage deep learning, okay? So this is why it is very important to repeat certain activities and to do revision. Once again, something which teachers and educators are very much aware of. The next principle is the principle of exercise. As I mentioned before, revision and repetition are very important, very crucial to learning. Things which are often repeated are best remembered. Once again, we can all picture ourselves trying to recite a poem or a prayer, or so the more we repeat things in our head, the more likely we are to remember them. If this exercise, if this repetition is done in a meaningful way, okay, and more often than not in context, the chances of this being learned is once again higher. Okay, so if we are trying to teach a child how to use the phone, we can do it through a picture of a phone, but the best way how to do it is by actually using the phone itself. The next principle is the principle of intensity. And when we talk about intensity, we need to focus on the impact that we will have on the people we are trying to teach. We learn through our senses, through what we perceive. So the more, the clearer, the more vivid an explanation is, the higher are the chances that whoever we are trying to teach is learning, of course. If we had to present whatever we want to teach in a boring way, this will be a boring experience. It will not leave an impact, and the likelihood is that this person will not learn. Here we have elements of creativity and innovative innovation. Imagination comes into place. So always try to teach whatever you intend to teach by making it as interesting as possible so that it can leave the highest impact possible. Readiness. This is unfortunately one of the principles which is very frequently overlooked. Okay, we learn best when we are physically, mentally, and emotionally ready to learn. Okay, we do not learn well if we see no reason for learning, and I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we try to teach something to somebody and this person isn't interested. That's one way which indicates that this person is not ready to learn whatever we want to teach him. We also need to keep in mind the basic needs of our learners. Okay, so if a person is sick, if a person is not feeling well, if a person is tired, hungry, or needs to go to the bathroom, these are all things which will not make the learner ready, and therefore learning will not be successful. Okay, I believe this needs to be given some more importance at home, in our classrooms, because at the end of the day, when we try to teach something, our main aim is for the learner to actually learn it. So if the learner is not ready, the chances are that we will be not making the best use of our time. So it's important to keep this principle in mind. The principle of requirement is a very basic principle, which basically states that we must have the resources necessary in order for us to achieve learning. Once again, I'm sure teachers are very, and LSCs and other educators are very much aware of this principle. We know that the more resources we have and the more creative we are with our resources, the higher are the chances that our learners will learn. The last principle is the principle of freedom. I find this principle to be a very positive one. Things which are freely learned are best learned. This is why it is so important to follow the child's lead or the student's lead, because this is when we get the highest chance of these individuals learning. When a child starts to explore and express themselves, this is the moment when a lot of learning is happening. If no freedom is granted, students may have little interest in learning. So yes, once again, learning doesn't just happen, okay? It is a relationship between the teacher and the learner. Of course, the teacher needs to have the necessary resources, needs to have the necessary aim in mind. However, the learner needs to be ready to learn, and they need to be left, to their own devices in terms of being free to explore, so that the learning can actually occur. So those were mainly the 8 general principles that I wanted to share with you. The webinar is short and straight to the point purposely, because we are all at the moment leading different but still busy lives with a lot of meetings and trying to cope with our kids and with a number of things we have to do. So this is what I wanted to share with you today. And now I invite you to move to the second part of our webinar, where you have the option to ask questions, and I will try to answer some of those questions. I can see I have some questions already. So, first question. I am a parent and I frequently work with my daughter. There are times when she seems to forget certain things that she would have learned. What can I do to help her remember things? Okay, so once again, I refer to the principle of exercise and to the principle of intensity. We need to be aware of the strengths of our children. Okay, some children tend to learn more through the sense of sound, others through the visual sense. If we keep these strengths in mind and we play to these strengths, the chances that our children will learn is higher. Also, exercise. It doesn't mean that if a child is able to do something today, if I ask the child to do the same thing a week later, they will still be able to do it. And this shows that learning has occurred, but it wasn't deep learning. So we need more repetition, more exercise. And as I mentioned before, if this repetition is done in context, the chances of learning is higher. Okay. Let's move on to another question. I find it very hard to sit down and teach my son because usually he gets bored after 1 hour. I try, but we are parents, not teachers. Okay. Yes. As I mentioned before, a number of parents are in a situation where they need to be parents, but they need to be filling in the shoes of their children's teachers, which is not easy. And that is why teachers, of course, have very specific training, which most parents don't. However, on the other hand, you need to keep in mind that as parents, you have a lot of opportunities to teach your children, and really and truly, you are the first teachers of your children. Here you mentioned that he gets bored after 1 hour. Okay, 1 hour may actually be quite a long period of time. I don't know how old your son is, but I am assuming that since he needs your help with teaching material, I am assuming that he is relatively young. And with younger children, we need to be a bit careful with the amount of time that we spend sort of asking them to focus on a particular task. So it might be a good idea for you to split this hour into 2 or 3 parts. Okay, having a 15-minute lesson is, you can have a brilliant lesson in 15 minutes. And more often than not, a number of studies show that in most lessons, the highest amount of learning happens in the first 10 to 15 minutes. So it's pointless having a 2-hour lesson, a 1-hour lesson, when the child would be lost after the first 20-25 minutes. On shorter sessions and more frequent sessions. Also, I see you wrote sit down. That is also something we can be a bit more creative with. Learning doesn't only happen when we are sitting down. Okay, we may have this notion of a child needs to be sitting down and focusing on his pen and paper, when most learning, in fact, happens when we are doing things in the natural context. Okay, so keep these two things in mind. You don't need your child to be sitting down to teach him, and break it down into smaller chunks. Let's see some more questions. Okay, so okay, in fact, I'm going to publish. Thank you, Rodi and Zamit, for your comment. This is not a question, but a comment. Rodian has told us, as a teacher, I believe that learning does not have to be done sitting down. Even in class, I find that it is best to teach through play. Even through writing is important. It is not the only way to learn. Perfectly put, Rodian. I totally agree with you. As we said before, children learn best when they are free to express themselves. And more often than not, they are free to express themselves during play. We underestimate play quite a lot, in fact. Another one. Okay, this is from an LSC. I'm finding the creativity aspect challenging. I'm resorting to videos, PowerPoint presentations, one-to-one sessions, but how can the tactile aspect be added? It's a very good question. Of course, we need to be working with the challenges that we are facing. Previously, when we were at school and going through our usual routine, let's call it, let's put it that way. Maybe we weren't resorting so much to videos or online teaching. So this experience has taught us that there are certain resources that we can use. Of course, there are certain challenges as well, and accessing the tactile aspect is also in fact one of the challenges. What I would suggest is maybe liaising with the parents of the children you are trying to teach, maybe informing them before with regards to what your intentions are, what the aims behind your lessons or sessions would be, so that maybe they could provide certain resources which would then help you deliver the lesson better. Once again, we understand that parents have their limitations, they are busy, they have their challenges. However, this is one way how you could possibly tackle this. Okay, I am an LSC. I will publish this. So I am an LSC supporting a student in Form 1. The student doesn't know how to read properly. Thank God this year he began to read a little bit. He only knows a few words. He understands text and is able to answer questions. Is there anything I can do to motivate reading? Okay. One of the first things I would ask my student would be, or maybe of course since you are his LSC you would already know, what actually motivates him. Okay, is it dinosaurs? Is it cars? Is it whatever, theater? Is it football? Is it anything? That already increases the chances of good and positive learning. Okay. Secondly, you need to try and be a bit creative in the way you present, okay, any reading material. Reading material doesn't need to be books, okay? So if a child, I don't know, likes cars, for example, I don't know, maybe I could do some PowerPoint presentation, um, and each car would have a particular name or sticker stuck to this car. These are just creative ways how you can engage your learners even more. Okay, some kids do have difficulties with reading and writing, and these difficulties they are there, they are tangible. Okay, so they will not go away. However, our role is to try and provide them with the tools to improve to their maximum potential. And I think thinking a bit outside the box will help us achieve this. Also, I must say that there are a number of services that specifically cater for reading and writing difficulties. And as an LSC or a school, you might have already looked into them. If not, it's a good idea to be looking into them. Uh, okay, how can we introduce freedom in a classroom setting, especially with children with autism? Okay, as some of you might know, I have quite a keen interest in autism. Um, of course, again, within a mainstream school environment, there are a large number of opportunities. There are also a number of challenges. Okay, by freedom, again, we need to focus on what motivates the child. Okay, because the moment the child is presented with something which motivates him, then the chances are that he wants to engage in this activity without us pushing him too much, and therefore without us restricting his freedom. Okay, there are a number of peer preparation programs and peer programs where the teacher together with the LSC would ideally also involve the other learners within the classroom. Okay, this is something which really works. Um, and I believe that there is nothing wrong in, and this is in fact the case, there is nothing wrong in allowing a child with very specific needs to access his freedom within the classroom, in the same way that a child wearing glasses, would need to wear the glasses every time the teacher is referring to the whiteboard. In the same way, a child with autism might need to go around the classroom once or twice every 10 minutes. This is a need that he or she may have, and as educators, we need to reach the needs of each and every individual we are trying to teach or to support. This is very important. Okay, I can see a few more questions. Okay, how can you motivate a student to be ready to learn? Yes, this is a big question, but we need to start in little steps. This is the way how to motivate children to learn. What do they like? You know, think of yourself at school. I'm sure you had teachers which were your favorite teachers, subjects which were your favorite subjects, times of the day which were your favorite times of the day. Um, and we need to be innovative in the way we are teaching children. If the PE lesson is one of the lessons which one particular child really enjoys, I mean, there are a million and one concepts that can be introduced into a physical activity session, apart from the physical benefits, of course. Um, so if we are a bit creative, concepts related to numeracy, literacy, science, can easily be incorporated into other subjects. Okay, so this is what I keep banging on about. We need to play to the strengths of the child. What does the child feel comfortable doing most? Because at the end of the day, when these children become adults and you know they start making their own decisions will more often than not be based on what they are good at, what they like, what they want to do. Because at that point in time, then there is nobody who's telling them what they shouldn't be doing, what they should be doing. So ultimately, they are still going to be engaging in activities which they feel they are good at. I believe we'll have one more question. Okay, we have some new ones. Yes, there has been an LSC who has commented about the constant distractions in the classroom, and yes, we can even discuss it even after this webinar because I am aware of the time. How can I make my student who's in kindergarten like school? He always cries and wants to go home. He never wants to stay at school to make the lesson or activity because he cries a lot. If I take him outside the class, he will stay outside, but he never wants to go back in the class. And if he sees the main door, he will cry a lot. Okay. I am assuming that this is a situation that a number of people working in nurseries or kinder would be faced with. Not all children accept to be detached from their families to the same extent and in the same way. Of course, we all know that children fare best in an environment which is healthy, safe, and in an environment which makes them feel secure. Once there is this security and this sense of being safe, this is when the child is more likely to start trusting. I believe this child has some issues with trusting. There could also be other difficulties. There could be very specific things which are bothering him, and this is the way how he is reacting to these things which are bothering him or which he is scared of. However, for sure, establishing a strong relationship with the child is the foundation of helping him to continue growing within the school. So it might be a matter of time. Some children, you know, might take a week to a month. Other children might take 3 months, 4 months, a year to get used to their environment, their teacher, their LSC, if they have an LSC, their peers. So we need to put things into perspective. If this child is in kinder, the likelihood is that he is around 4 years old, maybe even a bit younger, especially if it's the first time that he is away from the family. It's a very big change for these children. They are not always understanding what's going on around them, so there are a number of factors that play in here, and I believe that the school, together with the family, need to have a very good communication channel so that the best possible relationship is established with the child. I will take one last question, okay? I don't want to be very late. Okay. So here we have an LSC of a 10-year-old saying that they are finding it challenging to carry out lessons, even if they are very short lessons. He becomes challenging and violent, even when the lesson is twisted with his own interests. So when they play to his interests, he has severe ADHD, ODD, as well as anxiety, OCD, and dyspraxia. Okay, of course, it is from the short description that you have given. Yes, it is clear that there are a number of challenges. One colleague of mine has taught me that challenging behavior is challenging because it is challenging to us. So we are the ones being challenged by the behavior. So whenever we say a child exhibits challenging behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum, doesn't exist on its own. Okay, a child may pinch me, and I don't find that challenging. Maybe it doesn't bother me so much. But then another child who maybe spits at me, I would find that very challenging, whilst another person would find the pinching very challenging and the spitting sort of more or less challenging. So challenging behavior really depends on the person who is receiving this behavior. Okay, so even if we train ourselves not to be challenged by this behavior, automatically the behavior becomes less challenging. Yes, in such situations, we really need to focus on the basic needs of the child. Does this child need to have a movement break? Does he need to stand up? Does he need to go around the room? Does he need to have a particular order? Is there something in the classroom that's bothering him? And that is why he is really, really distracted and not focusing. These are the needs that we need to see to before actually focusing on the material we want to teach him. Of course, from here the kind of input I can give is limited, as you understand, because I do not know the child. I may be making it sound like a very easy task. It is not. Okay, it is not easy. More often than not, we try a number of things, most of which may fail, some of which may work, and then we need to build on those. Okay, I would like to conclude with that comment. I have also seen that some other people were giving some suggestions to some of the questions, which is really, really nice. I thank you for that. And I will be publishing your replies. I hope you have found this webinar interesting. I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.